What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking through 5 league-winning wide receivers that I think you guys should be looking to draft this year in fantasy football. These are pretty much like my guys at the wide receiver position, players who I think are being undervalued and could end up carrying you to the fantasy football championship. Now, before I dive into my 5 for this year, I kind of want to recap the 5 players I talked about last year, just to kind of hold myself accountable. Should you even listen to this video, here in 2025? So I talked about 5 wide receivers last year. It wasn't perfect, but the 5 players I talked about were Nico Collins, Malik Neighbors, Tank Dell, Xavier Worthy, and then Brian Thomas Jr. So I feel like there were 2 smash picks in there. Malik Neighbors, BTJ, both, amazing production given their ADP heading into last year. I think Nico Collins was a really solid pick. Tank Dell just ended up being a terrible pick, even though he got hurt. Like, you can't even really use that as an excuse because he was pretty awful even before the injury. And then Xavier Worthy, he was fine, had a strong close to the season, but I still wouldn't really consider that to be a hit. So like I said, it wasn't perfect, but overall, feel like, we won more than we lost there with the 5 wide receivers from last year. But now let's dive into this year here in 2025. And the one elite round 1 wide receiver I want to talk about is going to be Puka Nacua. He's being drafted as the wide receiver 7, the 111 according to consensus ADP. And I do think his price has started to dip, with the Matthew Stafford back concerns. And this is just a position where I am buying that dip. Obviously, it's, reasonable to be worried about the quarterback if, the starting quarterback is having serious back issues and he might not play this season or, is going to be injury riddled. That's obviously going to affect the wide receiver. But at this point, Matthew Stafford has been back at practice for a full week. I'm not, viewing this as a massive concern going forward. And even though Puka is not going to be anywhere close to the same upside if Stafford doesn't play, I don't think that Jimmy Garoppolo coming in just completely sinks Puka Nacua. And so I just don't think his value is going to bounce back to where it was, before all this, Matthew Stafford health issues. And so I will be buying the dip here. And looking at Puka Nacua, he was the wide receiver 2 in points per game last year, averaging 18.8 PPR points per game. And that's just a really strong number on its own. But when we actually look at his full games, he was even better, where he left early on in week 1 with an injury, and then his second game back from that injury, he was ejected before halftime. So in those 2 games, one of them he played less than a third of the snaps. The game where he was ejected, he only played 35% of the snaps. If you remove those 2 games and you just take his 9 healthy performances, he would have averaged 21.8 PPR points per game, and he's hitting nearly 22 points per game without hitting in the touchdown department. He only scored 3 touchdowns in 11 games. If you're looking at just the healthy ones, 3 touchdowns in 9 games. He was ultra efficient, averaged over 4 yards per route run, which led the NFL. Also commanded targets at a crazy high level, 43.6% target rate. And then, like I mentioned, the only real issue he's had is getting into the end zone, where he has, pretty clearly outperformed in the touchdown department in his first 2 seasons. Over the last 2 years, Puka Nacua has been targeted 266 times. That is 11th most in the NFL. He only has 9 touchdowns on those, 260 plus targets. That ranks 37th in the last couple of seasons. So he's tied with guys like Gabe Davis, Alec Pierce, Jalen Tolbert, Dontavian Wicks. And so even Vegas isn't projecting him to have a big touchdown season. I want to say his receiving touchdown line is at 5.5. I still think he has room to improve there. And he already proved that he could be a 20 plus point per game guy, even without hitting in the touchdown department. I think he has realistic upside where maybe he hits double-digit touchdowns. I don't think that's crazy. And all of a sudden, he is a true legit contender to be the wide receiver 1 overall on the season. So he's a proven elite wide receiver talent. He's in a great offensive situation. I think he's a mid-round 1 value that at this point you might be able to draft at the 1-2 turn. I think on Yahoo, he's the 204, which is just a screaming value. If you can get round 2 Puka Nacua anywhere, that just has to be an auto draft at that point. Now, this next wide receiver, going to be going a few rounds later. It's going to be Xavier Worthy, going off the board at the 503, the wide receiver 23. And I'm really just starting to get on board with this Chiefs offense, where it does kind of feel like this is the year where we get a real bounce back. From 2020 to 2022, Patrick Mahomes passed for at least 4,700 yards and 37 touchdowns. From 2018 to 2022, the Chiefs were top 6 in points and yards every single season. And they've really just kind of come down to earth over the last couple of years. 2023 and 2024, they've been 15th in points in both seasons. They've been 16th and then 9th in yards. And then Patrick Mahomes has maxed out at like 4,200 passing yards and 27 passing touchdowns. So I'm just not really accepting that this is like the new normal. Like, I don't think you have Patrick Mahomes, a quarterback who's setting all kinds of records, came in, just tore the NFL up, as soon as he got on the field as a starter. I don't think he's just going to be settling into like slightly above average quarterback production. Like, I just don't believe that. So I do think we could see a really nice bounce back here from him and this entire offense. And then for Xavier Worthy, I do think he is the most interesting weapon here on the Chiefs, where he didn't have like a picture perfect rookie season, didn't dominate throughout the entire year, but he did have a really strong close, where in his last 3 games of the regular season, he averaged 21 PPR points per game, average solid volume, over 10 targets a game. And then he put together 3 solid performances in the playoffs, where he went 5 for 45, 6 for 85 and a touchdown. And then in the Super Bowl, 8 for 157 and 2 touchdowns. In those last full 6 games, he averaged 21.6 PPR points per game. So he at least showed flashes, right? He didn't do it for a full season, but we did start to see him flash that upside later on in the season. Without the Rashee Rice suspension, Rashee Rice would just easily be locked in as the top Chiefs weapon, would probably be a lot less interested in Xavier Worthy, but it seems like the NFL is looking for a pretty big suspension here for Rashee Rice. I think a lot of people were assuming somewhere in like the 4 to 6 range. Then there's the report coming out that the NFL was pushing for like 10, which seems pretty crazy. Now maybe they're pushing for like an 8-game suspension. Whatever the number is, it doesn't seem like it's trending in a great direction for Rashee Rice. And we know that suspension isn't going to start until at least week 5. So there's like a real shot that Rashee Rice is missing pretty much the heart of the season. And you're in this spot where Xavier Worthy is going to have this long stretch where he's going to be able to operate as the wide receiver 1, potentially just take over some of the opportunities that would have previously gone to Rashee Rice. But then you also have like Rice kind of awkwardly being reintroduced into the offense later on in the season, kind of right before the fantasy playoffs. And I would just trust, Xavier Worthy more to kind of lock down a role and just be a key member of this passing attack. So like I talked about, Xavier Worthy showed flashes as a rookie. This is an offense with a very high ceiling. I think we could see the return of the Patrick Mahomes deep ball. Like, him and Worthy were just not connecting down the field last year. I think that's a huge area of improvement for both of these dudes heading into 2025. And then there's just not a ton of other weapons. And so I'm not like fully sold on Xavier Worthy as the talent, but the situation is amazing. And I think the Rashee Rice suspension just really opens up the opportunity for him to truly break out as this team's top weapon. And so you can draft him in the 5th round, where I think he has realistic upside to be like a top 10 fantasy wide receiver this season. Now, the next wide receiver I want to talk about is also going in round 5, and that is going to be Tetairoa McMillan, being drafted at the 5'10 as the wide receiver 29. And this is just like the perfect wide receiver 3 profile that I want to target, like these high upside rookie options. He goes 8th overall to the Panthers in this year's NFL draft. We just saw a season where we had 3 rookie wide receivers pretty much be league winners, with Malik Nabers, Brian Thomas Jr., and Ladd McConkey. All 3 of those wide receivers were wide receiver 1s from week 11 on. And so not only can these rookies deliver solid seasons, but they also typically backload their production, where when you need them most, that playoff push into the playoffs, that is when, they are firing on all cylinders. And then I just think historically, like, these top 10 rookie wide receiver picks have been solid options, especially in the range where Tet's being drafted. So these are top 10 wide receiver draft picks since 2018. We have Marvin Harrison Jr., Jamar Chase, Malik Nabers, Jalen Waddle, Drake London, Rome Odunze, Garrett Wilson, and Devonta Smith. Now, this is not like an 100% hit rate. There are certainly guys who are very underwhelming. Last year we had a couple of them, right? Marvin Harrison Jr. drafted way higher than this, for fantasy than where McMillan's going this year. he was underwhelming. He was the wide receiver 39 in points per game. You have Odunze, same draft class. He was a flop, wide receiver 56. But it's also tough to ignore like the true elite upside that you can get from like a Jamar Chase, a Malik Neighbors, guys who were like the wide receiver 5 and wide receiver 6 in points per game. And then you still have some more like median level, performers like a Devonta Smith, wide receiver 36, Garrett Wilson, wide receiver 30, Jalen Waddle, high-end wide receiver 2 at wide receiver 15. And so I just think when you look at the range of outcomes, I think this like wide receiver 29 mark is fairly close to the floor. He's not going to an amazing situation with the Panthers, but this is a wide open wide receiver room. He should be the number one target from day one. We saw Bryce Young kind of turn the corner last year. And then you take a look at some of the underperformers, right? Like a Drake London, his quarterback play was just completely atrocious. We know Bryce Young is going to clear whatever bar Drake London had. For Odunze, like we actually thought the situation could be kind of fun, but it ended up just being a terrible passing attack, and you're competing for targets with both DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. So I have some level of faith in this passing attack. I think Bryce Young is going to be fine. I am a believer in Dave Canales. I think he's going to, work to get McMillan some opportunities. And so, like I said, I think he's being drafted fairly close to his floor while just having a lot more upside in the tank here, especially relative to some of the other wide receivers that are going in this range. Like you have Tet, who, maybe a little bit more boom bust, kind of unknown, but a lot of these other guys in this range are probably, maxing out as like a back end wide receiver 2. And so I'm fine taking the swing on the upside in this range. And that's what we're going to be doing with this next wide receiver in Travis Hunter, going as an early round 6 pick as the wide receiver 32. And I've been high on Hunter, throughout the redraft season, all the way back to Dynasty. Like I have just committed. I am in on Travis Hunter, but I've also understood, right? Like there's a very wide range of outcomes here. There are legitimate usage concerns where, there was the potential, right? A few months ago where he's playing primarily on defense and he's like a 50%, snap share, raw participation guy. And then he's just completely useless for fantasy, right? But we've pretty much only gotten positive reports when it comes to his offensive usage. And it seems like his ADP is just kind of flatlined, where realistically it should be going up because he's been going in this range, and that's with like the uncertainty of his offensive role. Now it seems like we have a much clearer picture on what his usage is going to look like, and his ADP is just kind of hanging around here as like a fringe round 6 pick. And so I'm just going to run through some of the updates we've gotten. The first one, I guess the first big one, was before the first preseason game that he played in. Liam Cohen was asked like what his offensive snap load was going to look like, and Liam Cohen projected that he'd be playing 80% or so of the offensive snaps. Then we see him play in the preseason. He plays 88% of the snaps with the starters and then takes 50% of his snaps in the slot. So the snap percentage is great, and then the fact that he's working in the slot, also awesome. And then a couple of days ago, we got a report from Cameron Wolfe, who suggested that Travis Hunter would be full-time on offense and would ease in on defense. And so it seems like there's no longer all this like ambiguity about his usage. I think if Travis Hunter comes out early in the season and is productive as a wide receiver, I think he'll continue to see starting wide receiver snaps, playing the slot role in a Liam Cohen offense. This is a very valuable role. I'm a believer in the player, the talent. This is the number 2 pick in the draft. This is a freak athlete on an ascending offense. I think round 6 is just way too late for him to be going. So he is my 411 in my rankings. I'm going to have a lot of shares of Travis Hunter. And then my 5th and final league-winning wide receiver is going to be Odunze. He's being drafted as a late round 6 pick, the 6'10", as the wide receiver 33. And I've talked about how I just want pieces of this Bears offense. And ideally, I want some of the cheaper pieces, right? So I'm typically not reaching for like a DJ Moore. I'm more looking at like the Odunzes, the Colston Lovelands, the Luther Burdens, guys like that. And there's been a lot of buzz that like Odunze just straight up looks like the wide receiver 1 throughout the Bears training camp. In the preseason, he led the Bears weapons and targets with Caleb Williams. Now, he did have an underwhelming year 1, and typically that's like a huge red flag for me, right? He averaged 8.5 PPR points per game, was the wide receiver 56. It's not, super common for someone to completely flop in year 1 and then just come back and have a monster year 2. but I'm kind of willing to give him a little bit of a pass here. It was just a really rough situation. He had legit target competition with DJ Moore, Keenan Allen. I don't think his skill set was optimized at all. And so I do think he is like a legitimate year 2 breakout candidate. This guy was talented enough to be a top 10 pick in the draft, and not like a top 10 pick that was a reach. Like, pretty much all teams viewed him as a top 10 guy. He was going to go top 10 if the Bears didn't take him where they did. He should be getting the X wide receiver usage in this Bears offense. Ben Johnson has spoken very highly of him. And so I think he has like the legit upside to be the number 1 target on an ascending offense. And when you just like compare his price tag to DJ Moore, I would much rather draft Rome Odunze at the 6'10 than DJ Moore at like the 5'01. So I do think Rome Odunze could have a really impressive year 2 breakout here. And so that is going to wrap it up for my 5 league winning wide receivers. We had Puka Nacua, Xavier Worthy, Tetairoa McMillan, Travis Hunter, and then coming home with Rome Odunze. So let me know your thoughts. Do you guys agree with these rankings? Do you have some other shout outs? Would love to hear them. If you guys want my full top 200 rankings, kind of take a look at where I have these guys ranked. The link will be in the description. Free for you guys. You can download the Google Sheet if you want to make your adjustments, use it in your drafts. But thank you all for stopping by. If you enjoyed, hit the like button, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.